What's going on, Wellness Gang? Welcome back to Embodied Wellness Radio, a podcast framed around making women healthy again. And today I'm very excited to chat with you about 6 common mistakes when trying to heal your gut. I cannot count the number of times I have seen women in my practice who come to me and they have been trying to work on their gut health for years and in some cases even decades. And there's a lot of common mistakes that I see with clients either trying to DIY their gut health, which knowing how intricate our digestive system and our gut health is not the best approach. A, or B, they've worked with practitioners who maybe weren't super knowledgeable, didn't do the right testing, or just weren't well versed in really using an individualized approach for gut healing, and as such have not seen much success on their gut health healing journey. And in helping hundreds of women heal their gut and go from having symptoms that are quite debilitating and impact their quality of life to being able to live symptom-free, these are some things that I have seen in my practice when people come to me and we've been able to work on and change and have really been life-changing and so therapeutic for my clients and their success. So without further ado, let's get into the goodies. Number 1 is one that if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know I preach this all the time, and it is not knowing why your gut is off and not doing proper testing. As I mentioned, gut health is so complex. We have so much going on. I've actually done an entire podcast talking you through the digestive process and all the areas that things can go wrong. And a lot of the reasons why your gut could be off can manifest as similar symptoms. And I see this really commonly where clients will come to me and maybe say, I've been dealing with candida for the past 10 years and I want to get rid of it. And I'll ask them, why do you think it's candida? And a lot of the time there has not been any testing done. They maybe went to see a naturopath who told them they have candida, or they looked up some of their symptoms and that's what Dr. Google told them, or they think they have SIBO and then we do something like a GI map, which I talked about in my last gut health podcast, and it actually turns out to be low healthy bacteria and no overgrowth at all. And so without proper testing, we really can't create a proper treatment protocol. And you could be, investing hundreds and sometimes even thousands of dollars to try to be fixing your gut health, and you're targeting the wrong issue, and that's why your gut is not getting better. So we really need to know what is driving your symptoms, how and where your gut is off, so that we can actually create a protocol that's going to be individualized for you and get you the results that you need. And this doesn't only go for, what the imbalance is, whether that's dysbiosis, so that could be overgrowth of unhealthy bacteria, low levels of healthy bacteria, could be a gut-based infection like parasites or H. pylori. It could be something like candida. It also could be, low secretory IgA, intestinal permeability, like so many things can be going on in our gut. So again, this is why proper testing is important to know what's driving your symptoms and also what led you for your gut to be off. And I'm going to get into that in a different number, but it's also important to look at other digestive resources that could be driving where you are now. For example, if we run a GI map and a client shows they have low elastase and they have dysregulations to steatocrit, this is telling us that they don't have enough enzymes. Elastase is a pancreatic enzyme, and they could have issues with fat breakdown. Now, for having these two things happen, a lot of the food that person is probably eating is not going to be properly digested. Now we have food sitting in their intestines, which can start to ferment and grow bacteria, and again, can be causing their dysbiosis. So really important to know what the heck is going on and driving your symptoms when you're trying to treat your gut, and not to just guess or say like, oh, that symptom sounds like me, or that category sounds like me, or you see somebody online or on TikTok or Instagram, wherever it is, posting about like, my symptoms I had when I had SIBO, and people will look at that and be like, holy shit, that's me. And then they start treating SIBO, and again, that might not even be what's going on for them. So really important to know why your gut is off, and that will help to guide treatment. A treatment that works for something like a parasite is going to be so different than something that is going to work for treating SIBO. And a lot of the symptoms can be the same. They could have bloating, they could have diarrhea, they could have, indigestion, stomach aches. So again, test, don't guess, figure out what's driving your issue so that you can actually create a treatment protocol that's work, and you're not going to be throwing away hundreds of dollars and a lot of your time and investing in trying to heal something when you're running the race in the wrong direction completely. So common mistakes when trying to heal your gut. Number 1, not knowing why your gut is off and what you're actually treating. Number 2, I did a whole podcast on this called The Difference Between Gut Health and Gut Healing. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I highly suggest going back and giving it a listen, especially if you have gut-based issues. Really, really important to listen through that and to understand this point in more depth. So because I've done a whole podcast on this, I'm not going to go so much into it. But number 2 is blindly following generalized advice, such as eat more fiber, take a prebiotic, take a probiotic, and not actually, again, knowing why your gut is off. The reason why this general advice can be problematic for people is not because it's inherently wrong, but because the wrong people are applying this information. So when we take a look at the research and the data and the literature that we have on microbiome health, we know things like having a more diverse microbiome is helpful and supportive. And that's one of the only things we really know about the microbiome and what makes it healthy. So because we know this, foods like prebiotics, which are a certain type of carb that feeds good gut bacteria, can be helpful to drive up the diversity of our microbiome and therefore support better gut health. That's a fact. Nobody's arguing that. However, for a person who already has too much bacteria, such as in the case of SIBO, I know I keep mentioning this, but it's very, very common, they are going to be sitting there and have symptoms. I have bloating, I have gas, I have constipation, I have diarrhea, whatever it may be. And then they're going to see somebody post online like, prebiotics are great for your gut health. You should take these if da-da-da. And they go and they take them and it makes their symptoms way worse because now they've taken an already overpopulated microbiome, given those bacteria, both good and bad, a bunch of food, and now they're fermenting, they're causing way more gas, way more bloating, and the person feels way more symptomatic than before they were taking it. And so in some cases, this can actually make things worse. Same with fiber. Fiber does contain some prebiotics. It also contains certain types of starches that our gut bacteria feed on, and that can again make somebody who already has too much bacteria way more symptomatic. It can also be problematic, not so much in the sense that it's going to send somebody backwards or make their issue worse, but for somebody who does have low levels of healthy bacteria, this can also drive up their symptoms because they quite simply don't have enough resources, enough good gut bacteria to actually break down the fiber in the food. And so they're going to experience a lot more symptoms from eating things that are high fiber or high in prebiotics, and those two again do go together as well. So blindly following this generalized advice in some cases can actually make the person's condition worse, and in other cases can just drive up symptoms acutely. So, a lot of these things that we hear that are good for gut health, even fermented foods, right? Fermented foods are great. They have live bacterial cultures. I typically, for maintenance or for just lifestyle, much prefer these for generalized gut health over something like a probiotic for the right person, because we are getting a more diverse array of bacteria, and just because of the way that it's broken down when we eat fermented foods, that food is going through our body's natural digestive process and it's evenly coating our intestines. However, when we take something like a probiotic that's in a capsule form, we don't have control over where the probiotic opens, and it's not digested in the same way that food is, again, moving through as the bolus through our digestive system. And so for most people, fermented foods are going to be better than a probiotic unless you are using a probiotic specific strain for a specific purpose, like Saccharomyces boulardii in a gut health protocol or bifidobacteria where it's relevant. But anyways, I digress. A little bit of a tangent there. However, even things like fermented foods for people who have SIBO, too much bad bacteria, can again be problematic. Same thing with something like HCl. So that's a stomach acid support that a lot of people take as a supplement. This is actually contraindicated for somebody who has an H. pylori infection. So again, we really need to understand what's going on in the gut so that we can use advice and use treatment protocols and use supports that are going to be helpful for us, and they're not going to put us backwards, and they're not going to aggravate our symptoms. So blindly following generalized advice when you have gut-based issues, not great. Again, I talk way more about this in my podcast where I chat about the difference between gut health and gut healing. So if you have not given that a listen, I highly suggest going back and listening to that episode. Really, really great episode. Lots of good information in there. Okay, the other thing that's important to note is that a lot of this information that we get that's generalized really focuses on the health of the large intestine. And the small intestine is so important for our overall health. It's where most of our nutrient absorption takes place. It's where we have the largest mass of immune cells. Small intestine is like seriously an MVP of our gut health. We, again, need it to digest and absorb our nutrition. And yes, the large intestine is important. And that is where we should, in a healthy gut, have the largest population of microbes and bacteria. However, a lot of these generalized advice strategies that are given do favor large intestine health, and the small intestine is really left out. And we need to take care of our small intestine in a bit of different ways and make sure that we don't have overgrowths of bacteria in the small intestine, and that we can really optimize that nutrient absorption and our immune health that stems from there. So again, common mistakes when trying to heal your gut. We have number 1, not knowing why your gut is off and not doing proper testing. Number 2, blindly following generalized advice, such as eat more fiber, take a prebiotic, take a probiotic, eat fermented foods. And now we have number 3, not focusing on meal hygiene, spacing, and overall digestive hygiene. Okay, what the heck is that? Now, as I mentioned, I've worked with hundreds of digestive cases, and one thing I will say is in a lot of the cases, not all of them, many people are so ready to change their diet and to change their supplements that they're taking. They're like, yes, I'm ready to do this. I see a lot of type A's in my practice, which is not by coincidence. It ends up that a lot of type A's, go-getter, especially women, do end up with gut-based issues just because of the impact that we see stress have on our microbiome and our digestive health and our digestive resources and our intestinal lining. But anyways, I digress. So these women are like ready to take the supplements, follow a protocol, eat the foods, not eat the foods. They're like, I'll do whatever you tell me, except have proper meal hygiene, eat in a relaxed state, take your deep breaths before you eat, get into that parasympathetic state, do some box breaths before you eat undistracted, put your phone away, put your work away, just sit down and enjoy your meal. I've talked about this before, but digestion actually begins in the brain. We have the cephalic phase of digestion where we're actually preparing our body to digest food. So that happens when we see food and our body starts to smell it, and we're really using our senses to prepare our body to actually be able to break down and absorb that food. So that's where our body will start to secrete things like stomach acid and enzymes and get ready to eat that meal. Now, we also know that in order to be in rest and digest mode, that involves being in a parasympathetic state. And most of us live in this sympathetic state, fight or flight mode all day, right? We're working, we're turned on, we're going from one thing to the next. We're super stressed, we're super busy. And then we go down to eat. And when we're in that fight or flight response, we're in that sympathetic state, our body is actually drawing digestive resources away from our digestive system. Because if I was going back to, be chased by a bear, and that is, again, your body doesn't know the difference between stresses in getting chased by a bear and stresses in I'm looking through work emails while I'm eating. If I'm getting chased by a bear, I need to have glucose going into my bloodstream. I need all of my resources to go towards me being attentive and ready to deal with that stressor. And so when I'm in that sympathetic state, my body is drawing resources away from digestion because digestion is a very energetically expensive process. And so if my body is digesting food, of course, I'm not going to have as many resources to run away from a bear, to move, sugar into my bloodstream and to feed my muscles all this nutrition they need to keep moving and to be alert and to be aware. So when we're eating in this state, we're not going to have as optimal digestion. We're probably not spending enough time in that cephalic phase where we're preparing our body to break down food and to digest it. And so, of course, we're going to have issues with digestion. Now, this doesn't only go for acute-based symptoms. So people will notice that they feel more bloated when they're eating in that sympathetic state, and it's quite impressive. To me, it's not a miracle, but to a lot, it's a miracle how when they really get into that parasympathetic state and they slow down and they chew their food and they eat undistracted, like so many clients are like, wow, I can't believe how much that alone helped my bloating. And I'm like, yes, that's why I put it in every single program, because that shit really works. So really eating in this parasympathetic state is incredibly important. And in order to do that, we need to, again, take deep breaths before we eat. So we're slowing down our nervous system, really stimulating the vagus nerve, which is involved in a parasympathetic state, but it's also very involved in the gut-brain axis and sending signals about nutrients from our gut to our brain. So again, really helpful to have this stimulated when you are sitting down to eat, because if you don't, we're not going to have that same signaling. A lot of people will notice they eat past their body's signals of fullness because they're not actually in that parasympathetic state, and they have issues with the vagal nerve connection between the gut and the brain as well. Again, eating undistracted so that we're able to just be present with our food. These are all very, very important. So meal hygiene is so crucial for gut health, and a lot of people will overlook that on gut protocols. Again, they'll do everything supplement wise, everything diet wise, but they're just eating in a way that's not supporting their digestion. And going back to where I briefly touched on the low digestive resources, the same thing can happen, right? If we're not digesting our food, we have all those acute symptoms that I mentioned, but we're also going to have now undigested food sitting in the intestines, rotting, growing bacteria, and that's a great way to give yourself small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and dysbiosis. So very important to focus on meal hygiene. Other things that fall under this category are meal spacing. So the time in between your feeding sessions is very important. Whenever I say feeding sessions, I kind of feel like I'm talking about humans as if they're like a dog or an animal, but really we are mammals. So the time in between your meals is also important. I've again talked about this on podcasts before, but we have something called our migrating motor complex. And this is essentially like little housekeepers of your gut. So in between meals, when we're in this fasted state, they go in and they sweep out your intestines and they get all the crud out of there that wasn't fully digested during the natural digestive process. And so this migrating motor complex can only work in that fasted state. So if we're just eating all day and we're having little snacks and we're constantly asking our body to digest, and we don't give it enough time in between these feeding sessions, we are going to start to have, again, that buildup of undigested food, and we're not going to be able to properly clear our intestines, and that's going to also be problematic for the same reasons listed as not focusing on the meal hygiene. So really important that we leave about 4 hours in between meals. Yes, that includes snacks as well. So again, we can allow the migrating motor complex to do its thing. And really in severe cases, sometimes we also need to use things like, just kind of stemming off of that note, like a lot of pre-digested foods. So in traditional Chinese medicine, they'll use things like congee, which is really well cooked rice. For clients who have very, very compromised digestive systems, even using everything being kind of soft and mushy is very helpful as well. And again, this just puts less stress on our digestive system. So if I had a broken ankle and I was running 5 kilometers every single day on that broken ankle, how long do you think it would take it to heal? Probably a pretty long amount of time. And the same thing goes for our digestive system, right? If I have a weak or compromised or an injured digestive system and I'm eating all day and I'm eating really hard to digest foods and I'm eating a lot of food, it's going to be very hard for my digestion to heal. And this doesn't mean that you need to go and do a 7-day water fast, but it does mean that when we understand this and we can apply the principles like meal hygiene, meal spacing, chewing our food well, eating in that relaxed state. Sometimes it means for people, again, in more severe cases, using more softer pre-digested foods. This is really going to allow our digestive system to repair and to recover and to become more robust. So again, understanding these things super important. Still on number 3, we have like meal hygiene, meal spacing, chewing your food well for the reasons I just said, that mechanical digestion. So the digestion we do in our mouth through mechanics like chewing is a great way to pre-digest food before we ask our microbes and we ask our stomach acid and we ask all of those resources in our digestive system to break it down. And the closer that we can get the food that's coming from our mouth to be as consistent with that end product of digestion, which is this like mushy sludge, the easier it is going to be for our digestive system to actually work with that. So trying to chew each bite 30 times, if you've ever actually tried that, it's really hard. It's a lot. But again, for those who are struggling with digestive issues, very, very helpful. We want to give our body all of the help we can get to take as much stress off the digestive system as we can. Okay, time of the day that you eat is also important. So every cell in our body works on clock genes. And these clock genes regulate things like metabolism, digestion, or hormone status, or energy levels. And a lot of the time when we think of our circadian rhythms, many of us just think about, sleep and wake cycles or light and dark exposure. But really, we actually have clock genes that are working on regulating digestive resources as well. So we want to be eating the majority of our calories in the front half of the day, so breakfast and lunch, and then kind of taper off closer to dinner because that's the time of the day that our digestion is the most robust. So again, we want to work with our body's natural rhythms, take as much stress off the digestive system as we can, and try to really focus on again, getting the majority of your food intake in the front half of the day so that we're able to optimize those clock genes in our body's natural rhythm as well. Okay, so we have number one common mistake when trying to heal your gut is not knowing why your gut is off and not doing proper testing. Number 2, blindly following generalized advice like eat more fiber and take a pre or probiotic. Number 3, not focusing on meal hygiene, meal spacing, and digestive hygiene as a whole, not chewing your food well enough. So really just people who are so willing to take the supplements, eat all the foods, but they're not willing to look at all those other things that are so integral and so important and really just slow the heck down, which is so important regardless of what healing journey you're on, whether it's your gut or your hormones. We cannot do so in a fight or flight, stressed out state. Okay, number 4, this kind of goes towards number 2, but this is blindly buying or taking supplements. I would say this is like so common that clients will come to me on, 12 or 15 or 10 supplements, and some of them are gut health related. And I'm like, oh, how long have you been taking this? Why did you start taking this? And sometimes it's like I went to a naturopath and they put me on all these 10 supplements without doing any testing and the client stayed on them. Or they just, are consuming things online where it's like you saw somebody say this took away their bloating, so you buy it. And then you saw somebody else say, no, this thing was the thing that helped me. And then they buy that one. And then they see somebody else say, like, you should take glutamine. And then they end up with all these supplements and all this money they spent to take things that are, again, just generalized and not targeted for them. And again, I've talked about this on my podcast on the difference between gut health and gut healing, that some of these supplements can actually do more harm than more good. So people who are taking things like berberine or allicin or neem oregano oil because they've heard it's good for SIBO, but they have low healthy bacteria. Okay, so now you're depleting your healthy bacteria even more. Or somebody who's taking something like a prebiotic or a supplement that's just labeled gut health that has pre and probiotics with an intense SIBO flare-up. They're not going to do very well with that. So blindly buying and taking supplements when you have gut health issues is not a great idea. Largely, it's going to be a waste of your money, which in this economy, who could afford that? And sometimes it can actually make matters worse. And the other thing is kind of going with those supplements is a lot of the times when people will blindly buy them or they're trying to DIY their gut health, they're actually not using the supplements in the therapeutic dose and therefore they're not getting the correct effect of it. So I've seen this a lot with people treating SIBO. I've also seen it, coming from some other practitioners when clients come to me, is they'll be taking something that's actually well studied for SIBO, like oregano oil or allicin, and the dose is not a therapeutic dose. So this client's just like throwing away money and not taking it in the amount or for the length of time that it needs to be used. So we really need to, again, use supplements in a targeted way where we have the clinical data and evidence to support that it's for the right duration, for the right person, in the right amount at the right time of the protocol. And I'm going to get more into this in my next podcast drop, which is talking about issues with protocols. But again, just blindly buying and taking supplements for your gut health is not a great idea. I have personally done this when I was first experiencing gut-based issues. And I think I've talked about this before, but taking a way too high dose probiotic actually really sent me over the edge with gut-based symptoms and issues. And I didn't want to fork up the money to buy testing because I was in school at the time and I couldn't really afford it. I did have to make a lot of sacrifices, but if I added up all the money I took from just buying random supplements and trying to fix my gut myself, I would have saved so much money by investing and working with a good practitioner and doing the right testing. And over the span of, the years that I was trying to do it myself, I wish I just made the investment, bit the bullet, even though it sucked and I had to make some sacrifices, and just committed to getting better with the right support and not just shooting the shit or trying to, buy things and hoping that something sticks. So number 4, we have blindly buying and taking supplements, or taking supplements at the wrong dose for the wrong person, the wrong amount of time, and not using them properly the way they're studied for therapeutic use. Okay, number 5. This kind of goes back to number 3 as well, but it's not addressing stress and poor habits that led your gut to be off. So 100% of the time that I work with clients, doesn't matter if we're doing a gut protocol, doesn't matter if we're trying to work on their hormone health, 100% of the time I have an intake that looks at their history because I'm interested in what the client has going on right now. I'm interested in seeing what's off. I just said that in number 1, we need to know what's going on. But I can't properly treat a person. I can't properly help a person. I can't properly service a patient if I don't know why they got there in the first place. Because then what happens is we're going through, these incredible gut protocols that are individualized and they're treating what we found on the labs, but we didn't address why they're there in the first place. So in the best case scenario, the client gets better, all their symptoms go away, and then boom, they come back. How many people do you know, if you know anyone who's dealt with SIBO, who has had recurrent SIBO or just relapses, or they feel better, they try something, it works, and then it stops working? Like, honestly, you hear this so often, and it's because people have failed to address why they got there in the first place and things that are harming their gut health. And, SIBO, yes, does need to be eradicated, but at the same time, somebody didn't just magically appear with SIBO, right? Like, there were things that led to this event. Your symptoms, unless you caught something like a parasite, you didn't just get them all of a sudden. Usually they're progressive, especially with more chronic cases. And when we don't address why the person got there, and we don't address things like chronic stress, or, like I said, I see a lot of clients that are type A. I also am too. And that's how I got myself into a lot of these health issues where we're go. We want to do all the things. We want to train hard. We want to, get everything done. We want to be so productive that every single second of our day is filled up with something in our schedule. That's a great way to pull your body out of health and into dysfunction. That's a great way to, really ruin your gut health from overstressing and from eating in these sympathetic states. I see a lot of clients too who've done things like bodybuilding shows or chronic diets where they're overtraining and they're eating the same foods all the time. People who are really into meal prep, they don't vary their food. They're killing off all of their good bacteria because they have lack of variety in their diet. They're overtraining, which is leading to intestinal permeability. Now that they have, low levels of healthy bacteria, their body is a lot more prone to have overgrowth of bad bacteria, to catch gut-based infections. We also have, I see a lot of fitness people who are eating all of these protein powders and protein bars that are full of things like erythritol and maltitol, which I'm like, holy smokes, no wonder that we got where we are. And there's just a lot of, lifestyle habits that contribute to poor gut health. And maybe that will be a podcast episode of its own, because if I start listing those off, we're going to be here all day. But We really just need to look at when we're trying to heal our gut, why did I get here in the first place? If I never addressed that and I was still, living my life the same way that I was 8-9 years ago when I had these gut-based issues, I could have spent all the money on proper testing, proper protocols, but I wouldn't have fully got better. And that actually kind of is my healing story. I, did all the things, I got the right testing, I went through protocols and I felt good, but the last 20% of me really getting better to the point where I can, make sourdough and eat sourdough and not be bloated and not get constipated and be able to go out to eat without anxiety. That extra 20% really came from the lifestyle changes that I had to make. And so speaking from experience, yes, you can start to feel better. But in the end of the day, your issues are going to come back if you don't address why your gut got out of balance in the first place and really start to take a look at and audit your lifestyle and your habits that got you there. And if you're not sure how to do that, or you're like, I don't know, is this impacting it? I highly suggest working with somebody who can help you figure that out. This is why I do such thorough intakes with my clients, because I don't just want my clients to get better. I want them to stay better too. And that comes from having hard conversations. A lot of the time these lifestyle things or these stressors are the hardest part to change because they're our lifestyle. This is shit and habits that we've been doing for years and in a lot of case decades as well that really aren't going to change overnight. And it's hard, to ask somebody who's training for a few hours a day to be like, yeah, I actually need you to scale back. Whoa, now we are like, okay, we've also got, the mindset side of things, the mental health side of things. Now, maybe for that person, it's actually a sense of control, or they feel the desire or the need to control things. So now it's we're not only asking them to scale back on, exercise or dieting, we're actually opening up a can of worms. And now it's we might actually need to involve a counselor along this so that we can work on some of these mindset limitations and these roadblocks that are going to get in the way of making the proper changes in order to get better. And this shit's hard. It's hard work. I still struggle with some of the things that got me unwell in the 8 or 9 years ago. They still to this day are things that I have to be very, very mindful of and work on and catch myself in those cycles. I am very prone to filling up my schedule to the very brim. And I just recently, a couple weeks ago, actually was why am I feeling so overwhelmed? I feel like I'm always doing things and there's a million things to do. And I'm always just barely making it through. And I had to be that pattern that I have is again, I scale back my schedule. I start to feel good. Then somebody asks me hey, do you think you could do this? And I'm yeah. Or I take something else on, or I add something else to my schedule. And then it gets to the point where I feel overwhelmed and I'm okay, there I am in the cycle again. And I go through the same thing. I peel everything back and then it becomes this cycle. So some of this stuff, it's not going to change overnight. And we really just have to be very patient with ourselves and to make these changes and know that they don't have to happen all at once, right? They can happen slowly. Ideally, people who are really committed to their healing are I'm going all in, I'm making all these changes. But for a lot of us, this does need to happen in a way that's a little bit more gentle and allows us to transition our habits, because it really is not easy. Okay, so common mistakes when trying to heal your gut. We have number 1, not knowing why your gut is off and not doing proper testing. Number 2, blindly following generalized advice like eat more fiber and take prebiotics. Number 3, not focusing on meal hygiene and spacing. Number 4, blindly buying and taking supplements or using supplements not in their therapeutic dose and with the clinical application. And number 5, not addressing stress and poor habits that led your gut to be off. Number 6, and final one, is cutting out foods thinking that is the only issue. Y'all, I'm going to die on this mountain. I can't even count the number of times that I've said this, but food is not the problem. Your reaction to food is the problem. I can't, I swear I've talked about this so many times, but it is so common, and I always feel so much sympathy for people who are in the situation where they come to me and they have been managing their gut symptoms by eating next to nothing, or they're yeah, my gut's fine when I'm eating X, Y, and Z, but as soon as I eat, and then they go on to list all of these things, then my gut's really off. And so they've just been living their life in symptom management, which is not a way to live. We want to create a gut that is so robust that it's able to digest and absorb and break down a large variety of foods, and that we're not having to restrict ourselves all the time just to manage our symptoms. We want to bring our body up to a great resilience where we're able to digest all these foods and understand that food sensitivities are just symptoms and just messages from your body. Food is not the problem. A carrot is not the reason why your gut is off. And so even if you don't eat carrots and your gut feels better, the question is, why is your gut reacting to carrots? And when we answer that question, we can focus on healing. So when trying to heal your gut, yes, certain dietary strategies that might involve cutting things out, like a low FODMAP diet, is very well studied for aiding in symptom management of SIBO. I use that in my SIBO protocols in the beginning, but the intention is using it for a short duration with the goal of adding foods back in. And the real reason behind it is actually to manage symptoms. It's not a healing strategy. And so cutting out foods thinking that that's the only issue or that's going to fix your gut is a very great way to give yourself disordered eating with food, thinking that we have to be fearful of these foods or our body can't handle them, when really we want to bring our body up to a place where we have a robust enough digestive system, enough resources. We've, gotten rid of these infections. We've rebuilt our gut health. We've refortified our intestinal barrier. We've brought up our digestive enzymes and stomach acid and increased our capacity for including a lot of produce and different variety of foods, which is ultimately still helpful for our gut health. So it can actually also become this vicious cycle where we cut out foods thinking that's the issue, and then we actually end up making our issues worse because we don't have enough variety in our diet, and now we're killing off healthy bacteria, and it can just become this vicious cycle. So again, food is not the problem. Your reaction to food is the problem, and that is something that is really important to consider on your gut healing journey. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I wanted to chat about this because I know so many women struggle with gut issues. A lot of my practice is helping women through this. And I feel so much empathy, and I've been in that position, as I mentioned, for women who are trying so hard to get better. They're spending money, they're doing all these things, changing their diet, taking these supplements, and they're just not seeing the results that they want. And so I hope that this message can give people hope that you're not broken, you're not hopeless. I know what it's like to feel hopeless on your journey. You can get better with the right help and the right support and understanding how to heal yourself based on what is actually going on. And so, again, I hope that this can just inspire somebody to really understand that the issues that they're having don't have to be chronic. They don't have to be forever. Healing is possible, but we do need to understand how to properly heal. We do need to use an integrative approach that looks at history, your habits, as well as proper supplementation and dietary strategies done in the right way in order to actually help you get better and stay better. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I am going to do a follow-up podcast where I'm going to chat you through common mistakes I see on gut health protocols. So this might be for the person who has actually been on a SIBO protocol, maybe with a practitioner, or they've tried to heal intestinal permeability. Maybe they actually do know what's going on in their gut and they have done testing and they're feeling frustrated, or they're at their wit's end, or they're kind of reached a roadblock in their healing journey. That episode is for you. It is coming up and it's going to be a good one. So if you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to save and share with somebody who you feel like could benefit from this information. It also really helps out the podcast if you can give us a 5-star review and add a comment wherever you're listening to this, which helps us to grow the show. And it also helps me to keep providing you with free information, which you guys know I love doing. You can find me on Instagram at Sarah Collins Wellness, and I have lots more information there on how to heal your gut and different strategies, as well as talking through some client cases. So don't forget to connect with me on Instagram as well. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you all next week.